ready to build resiliency, create a healthy lifestyle, and overcome adversity with a warrior mindset. This is Define the Fight with Mariah Prussia.
Hey everybody, welcome to this fine Monday morning, and happy Veterans Day to all who have served and continue to serve our country. In honor of Veterans Day, I thought it was very important to make sure that I brought forth an individual who has definitely served his country in many ways. You know, and I'm just honored. I know my dad has served, my grandfather has served, and a lot of individuals have had friends and family that have served our country. And it's important to make sure that we are sharing stories of individuals, because the thing is, we can read things in history books, but the reality is, unless you're that individual that's in the air or on the ground, how do we truly know what that experience was like? So I'm grateful to have Jim Carrier. He's a 77-year-old veteran. He was tasked with special operations and then also a crew chief gunner, the 57th Assault Helicopter Company, and served in 1968 to 69. So, Jim, you know what? It is a true honor and pleasure to have you on our show today.
Well, thank you for having me.
You know, I know I'm sure you've got a lot of different stories, but I'd like to start with some of the different roles that you did or served with for our country during Vietnam.
Well, I'd like to start out from just my family's perspective in a small town, growing up in a small town, and my father was in the Navy in World War II, and his ship, USS Chicago, was sunk in the Battle of Rennell Island. My uncle was in the Battle of Bastogne, and most of my family was Navy, and now my grandson, he's going into the Air Force, so we have military background. And when I started out in basic training, and I had three options as a draftee, and then you don't usually get that, so I could have been an MP, supply clerk, or clerk typist, and I chose MP. I got to Fort Gordon after basic training, and the drill sergeant came out and said, who wants to volunteer to go with a friend to Vietnam? You're all going anyway. And so I raised my hand with about 30 of us, and so we were going to go to Okinawa to train dogs, sentry dogs, before we went to Vietnam. Well, come to get our orders, all the rest of the people who didn't raise their hand went to Germany, Alaska, Hawaii, stateside, Europe, and so the 30 of us that volunteered went to Vietnam. We trained our dogs in Okinawa for about 2 months. Those dogs were trained to kill, and you couldn't bring them back home with you, as opposed to a scout dog. So we arrived in Vietnam Tan Son Nhut Air Base in March of '68, and it had just been hit. And here we sit, no weapons, in the dark, with our dogs, not knowing what to do. We got out of there, and I flew to Cam Ranh Bay, where other people flew to different duty assignments. When I got to Cam Ranh Bay, it was just like being in Fargo. No war, no combat, no rockets coming in. And so I stayed there, I suppose, about a month or two. And then I got orders to transfer to an outpost called Tuiwa. And from Tuiwa, I got into a conflict and put in for a 1049 and for door gunner. And from Tuiwa, I went to Phu Thai and met a wonderful officer named McCluskey, and he was a first lieutenant. He was one of the best officers I ever had experienced in the service. And he said, well, your 1049 came in. He said, do you want to change it? I can get you out of it. He said, because where are you going?
Take a deep breath. It's okay. I know there's a lot of emotions, especially when you're sharing things from the past and different experiences that you've been through. I know there's a lot of veterans that are working through step by step with PTSD also.
Anyway, I told him I grew up in a small town and keep your word. So I kept my word. And they picked me up in an outpost called Quinyon. And it was a 155th helicopter company out of, I think it was Bambi 2 at 155th. And they kind of showed me what a helicopter ride was, because when they took me to Khartoum just before we went in, they tilted the helicopter about 45 degrees, and I was looking straight down at the ground. So I got my first experience about falling out of the helicopter, but centrifugal force kept us in there. Anyway, when I got to Khartoum, I had been living in, just like it was in stateside, billets. And here I came to Khartoum, go back into tents that were rat infested and stunk like sweat, and you could hardly move in the tents because you had foot lockers and wall lockers and duffel bags on the floor. And so if something happened, you could hardly get out of your tent because everybody was in the way. But so I went from nice place to what have I done now?
Right.
Experience. So that was when I first got there. Now, if you want to know more about our missions, or when I first arrived, they told me that we'd be flying missions into Laos and Cambodia, and I was unaware that that was even happening at the time. And they told us we had two missions, one for the 4th Division out of Pleiku, Dokdo, and in that area of operations. And the other mission was Command Control Central in Khartoum, which was the 5th Special Forces, and our mission was called Prairie Fire. And Prairie Fire was the code name for we're in trouble. Come and get us quickly. And that's the missions we flew on till I de-roast in June of '69.
And I'm assuming a lot of different transitions, clearly. So you were working, starting with dogs. And then transitioned, like you said, your first helicopter ride, going into being a gunner. Now, we're going to go into a quick break, but when we come back, if you're open to, I would love to hear more about your missions. I think it's very important for individuals to understand what war actually look like and how blessed we are in this very moment that we had individuals that worked and sacrificed their life for our freedoms. Do you want to dive into or explain or talk about a mission or two that really sits forth on your memory that what you want to share with everyone?
I think the combats or the resupply was pretty easy. The guys out in the field needed sea rations and water and all that type of material. That was pretty easy, but when you got into combat, you don't realize the impact it has on your life. I flew missions into Laos, and I didn't even realize I was in Laos. And throwing down Maguire rigs from ropes to get them out of there was a new experience to me, but you kind of shut that out when you got back home because you just didn't want to deal with it. One of my first real bad missions where I got shot down was on right outside of Dokdo. on a fire base called 19. And I wasn't wearing a chicken plate or a flak vest. I didn't even realize it. And the first load of troops that went in, the NBA were waiting for them in bunkers, and we didn't know it. The recon hadn't told us that. And we got shot out of the LZ except for those 8 people. And we circled around for 15 minutes or so while they brought fast movers in. We watched them blow the living crap out of the area. We could listen to and monitor those on the ground, and there was only one left, and he was a lieutenant. So then is when I started to feel this was combat. We dropped in the rest of the team. It must have been 30 or 40 after the fast movers had taken over. And the last load that I took in there was a guy sitting, a grunt, sitting next to me. And on his helmet, he had Crookston, Minnesota. And I'm from Middle River.
Right.
So I started talking to him, and I said, you better lock and load because this is a hot LZ, and you better roll when you get in there. Anyway, we went back home that night. We pulled up, and we got shot down and got rescued by another helicopter company. Took back to Khartoum for our main base. And that night we were talking about it, and the rest of the ship stayed, and 2 medevacs got shot down, and our boys were out there until, 10, 11 o'clock at night, so they had to come home at night. And that was kind of one of my first experience with combat. We went back, I suppose 2 or 3 days later, because we were socked in. We couldn't get into the base. And I remember pulling into the base and all the feelings from the smoke from the fires and seeing all the troops on the fire base and all the bodies laid out. And when we started to pick them up, my legs started to shake. I couldn't stop them. And this went on for half an hour. My body just couldn't control it. So we used to call it busting our cherries because you got to see combat. And from then on, I was assigned more to FOB missions, and we staged out of Docto. And when we drop in these special forces, sometimes we drop them in at night, sometimes we'd extract them at night under flare power. They had 100,000 watt flares that we drop out there, about 3 foot long and about 8 inches wide. So those are the types of missions we had, and we'd extract them sometimes with McGuire rigs, throw down ropes or ladders or whatever. But it's not fun. It's not romantic.
Well, I couldn't imagine, because what was the average age? So when we look at Vietnam and most people getting drafted, I have an 18-year-old son. I have a 13-year-old son. And what you guys saw at such a young age, I couldn't imagine how my children would be able to handle or to cope, especially while under combat. So what age were you when you went in? Were you 19? Were you 18?
I think I was 18. I turned 21 in Vietnam. And one of my pilots was 18 or 19, 18 and a half. I remember teaching him how to shoot the M60. And I just thought, boy, he looks like he's only 15 years old, you know. So his name was Billy Odell. But there's a lot. I've got to read some. It's all right if I read something?
Yeah, go ahead.
The movie We Were Soldiers once by, I think Mel Gibson directed it and portrayed Colonel Harold Moore. And Harold Moore had a statement he put out on one of his quotes, and I love to say it to those going into the service and the combat vets that I've been with and the combat vets that I haven't been with who have been experienced combat. Here's what he said. There is no such thing as closure for the soldier who has survived the war. They have an obligation, a sacred duty, to remember those who fell in battle beside them. All the days to bear witness to the insanity of war. So that's kind of how I live, by that statement.
It's a powerful statement because every day is you're defining your fight, and the different visions, the smell, the sounds can come into play at any time. And the war, Vietnam War may be done, but is never really done for an individual who has served. What are some of the things in the areas that you leaned into to help towards that healing process?
Well, first of all, I got into drugs to try to cope with it. And I went for a year on drugs, everything from marijuana to you name it, a lot of alcohol. And that's how I coped with all the feelings that you push down inside. I went through a divorce after being married and having 4 boys, and that was hard. I didn't go to the VA until 2005 or 4, 3, right around there, and started counseling on the pain I was feeling. And I always look at it as it's psychological, that you push down things and you get layers, and every layer has to be peeled back. And so back in the 90s, I started writing, and I met a gal at my church, and she had just gone through a breakup, and she had sold all her belongings or put the wedding invitations out. And I said, then he said, no, I don't want to get married. So I heard her story, and I started writing a song about it. And I said, hey, do you want to sing this? She said, well, it's just like my story. I said, well, let's sing it. And we recorded it and entered it into K100. I think it was K100, the country chicken contest. And we won that contest. And the song went to Nashville. So I said, well, I guess I can write a little bit. And I started writing. And every song you write, another layer comes up. And so that's what I've been doing. And I got involved with Dan. I met Dan. You know Dan Hudson. He's with Operation Check 6, meaning we got your back to help prevent suicide with veterans and first responders. So those are things in counseling that helped me a lot.
You mentioned writing music. What type of music? You said country. Do you have different genres that you're currently writing when you're releasing?
I have everything from blues to jazz to country to crossover, little rock. So it's a variety of genres. So.
Well, I'm glad that you found something where you can have that healing space, but then also to provide healing to others by listening to the words that you're sharing within your music. Now, not everybody finds their passion or their purpose when it comes to that healing process. What are some different things that you would share with soldiers that are coming back? You know, we know that counseling, you might not find the right counselor at first.
Well, I think you have to find a counselor that that cares, that wants to minister to your needs. I found that just talking about it. Here's an example. One of my pilots, who's really dear to me, is his name was Fred Lamp, and he said, Jim, he drinks a lot. He said, Jim, I can't remember anything. So when we go to the reunions that we have every 2 years or every year, he'd start talking. And I'd say, do you remember that, Fred? Oh, yeah, I remember it now. And pretty soon, he was remembering a lot more, and he didn't even realize he was remembering it because it was all stuffed down. So talk it out. That's what I do.
Well, I think the part for me that really is troubling is that we have a lot of soldiers that are homeless, that are living under the bridges, so on and so forth. And for us, in regards to not to forget, but then also to help and assist. And how can we as individuals who have never served our country help individuals in need? Because I couldn't imagine going from one world to another and then trying to come back to civilization where it's so different. You know, what ways can individuals as civilians help soldiers when they come back? Because there's a lot of demons that you guys are fighting.
You know, I think of Dan, he's got a place he visits down in Minneapolis, and they bring blankets to the vets that are on the streets and help them out. And pray for them. Give them some money if they need money. Lots of things you can think of that are good to help them out.
100%. Yep. Now, with your music, I'm going to circle back to your music. Is there one song in particular that really hits home for you that you want to share a couple of the words or verses? I'm not saying you got to sing, Jim, even though I would love to hear you sing. If there's a song that's like, okay, this one really hit home for me.
They all kind of hit home, you know. It's just what layer is going to come out that day. And I wrote one the other day to my kids, and trying to think of the name of it. Don't be like me. That's what it was. It talks about, I taught you to be strong. Don't be like me.
What I can tell you, Jim, is for you coming on the radio show today is you are strong. Overcoming drugs and addiction is strength. Being able to share your story, bits and pieces just today, because I know there's a lot of pages and chapters that you have written within your mind and within your body and the steps that you've taken within your life. That is strength. And I think strength is defined in so many different ways, and we view it as it has to be this physical strength. But the reality is there's physical strength, there's emotional strength, spiritual, and mental strength. And sometimes we ebb and flow on different mountains where we're stronger in one area than in the other. But it's amazing to see. I know men don't like to show emotion. But when we see true emotion, that is true strength. Jim, you know, we spoke about a variety of different things with your missions and then overcoming PTSD, which I think is a lifelong process. What are some different ways or areas of support veterans you can lean them or lead them towards for healing?
Well, first of all, I want to say that first casualty of war is innocence. And everybody better understand that. As far as join a group, I don't care if it's a single group, if it's a married group, if it's Operation Check 6, start talking about your pain. Go to the VA, find an outlet, whether it's bowling or singing or speaking or whatever you want to do, but get that toxicity out of your life because it just festers.
And it's only going to grow.
Yep. And I'm a Christian, and I depend heavily on my Lord and Savior. So that's just to get me through daily.
And it's recognizing that, you know what, he's the strongest man. We look for strength, and it's important to make sure that we're looking up. I found this amazing thought for today, and I wanted to share it. Dear veterans, those of us who have never served will never fully understand the sacrifices you've made both in times of peace and of war. We will never fully understand what you were required to do or how you were able to do it. We will never fully understand the depth of your scars. But what we can offer you is this. We see you. We recognize your humanity, and we send you love that is gentle, patient, and healing. With blessings and gratitude, we ask that you remember you are loved. Thank you. And Jim, thank you so much for serving our country. Thank you for serving and helping others heal through your music. But man, what a true warrior coming in here today, because I know it wasn't easy. But I can tell you from me sitting across from you right now at this table, it was worth it. And I know that individuals listening today have a better understanding of what you sacrificed and what others are sacrificing for our freedoms. So sincere gratitude and thanks to you, Jim, for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
You're absolutely welcome. We have so many different things coming up, and we've spoken about resiliency, personal interest stories, and mental health. I think that is a really big thing for a lot of individuals. We've shifted in a lot of different turmoil in different times. But what I can say is this, moving forward, is try not to get emotionally attached to an item, to a thing, or an outcome. Focus on the process. The process is going to lead you to the outcome, and emotions aren't good or bad. They just are. And negative emotions protect us. I've learned this. But positive emotions also provide opportunity. So moving forward, find that opportunity and get out there each and every day and define your fight. Until next week, we'll see you then.